Ja, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe SI Talk. Heute bei mir ein Startinterview. Kuniko Limited ist man sieht es auch hier schon, Battery Metals in diesem Bereich tätig, in Skandinavien oben, so viel kann ich schon mal verraten. Aber sonst habe ich eigentlich schon nicht viel mehr Ahnung, bis auf das, dass sie einen sehr interessanten Aktionär haben. Aber wir haben ja hier in Antony Beckmand, hier der CEO der Company, der kann uns das Ganze erklären. Deswegen rede ich gar nicht mehr viel mehr, fragt gleich ihn, was los ist. Anthony, thank you for your time. I said in my German introduction, I have no really clue about your company. So maybe you can give us a elevator pitch about your company, what you're doing, what you're looking for, and what is the highlight of the company, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you for having me on. So Kuniko Limited is an Australian-listed mineral exploration company. We're headquartered in Norway, where the majority of our projects are. We came on to the ASX in end of 2021 as a spin out from Vulcan Energy Resources. So Vulcan has the lithium brine project in the Upper Rhine in Germany, and is well on its way to becoming a leading lithium producer for Europe. So it was through the Vulcan vision that Kuniko was created. They previously held these exploration licenses in Norway, and we're keen to see those being developed. Norway is a mineral-rich country historically. It's been focused, I guess, over several decades and has done quite well with oil and gas. But really, there's an untapped potential here. We all know that the Nordics are quite rich, and Sweden and Finland are probably in the lead in terms of mine development and mineral exploration. But Norway's really been an untapped area, and that's the potential Vulcan saw and created Kuniko back in 2021.
What I see is very unusual for an Australian company. You have only 86 million shares outstanding. What's happened? Normally, the Australian is here a zero missing or something. Normally, you have always a billion shares outstanding. So that's very unusual.
Yes, I think this is one of the most attractive features of Kuniko is the corporate structure is very tight. So 86 million shares on issue. We've had sort of one capital raise in terms of sophisticated investors in, I think, 22, and then in mid 23, that's when Stellantis came on. Global auto giant came on as our top shareholder. They now own 20% of the company, approximately. Vulcan sits in there at 16%. And so, yeah, within the top 20, that accounts for about 60% of our register. I think we've been quite prudent in terms of our use of capital. We've put pretty much everything directly into the ground to produce results. And I think that when we get into the progress of the company, I think it's been quite remarkable that we've been able to actually develop a couple of decent projects that are quite promising for the future in what is a very short space of time with a limited amount of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that the shareholder structure is really great, or is unusual for a junior exploration company. Stellantis is a really big company, in very unusual that they are stepped so early in, I must say. That is really attractive. So normally they are always coming in a late stage, and they make also then off-take agreement with you. What is also unusual, then from my understanding, you're in early stage, or you are in advanced stage.
No, correct. When Stellantis came on, it was at, I would say, the very early stage. So this is really driven by their Dare Forward 2030 strategy, where they're looking to I guess, have a 100% electric vehicle offering by 2038 in Europe, and I think it's about 50% in North America. So this comes down to the whole issue of ethical and sustainable supply chains. Here we are in Norway. It's a very short distance to the European market. And that untapped potential that we spoke about earlier of the Norwegian projects, where there's so many historical mines of decent grade that have been underexplored. So, it's through that relationship with Vulcan, Stellantis, a shareholder of Vulcan and strong supporter of Vulcan for the lithium. So it's really, filling out their procurement needs for that Dare Forward 2030 strategy that they have. So they came on early. I think it wasn't a quick decision on their part, and certainly they did their due diligence over a long period of time before really jumping in, getting behind us, and making us the only exploration company in the world to be backed by a major automaker.
Before we go a little bit to the later to your project, you have a very interesting slide in your presentation. That is market outlook, called it. Demand increase, new mines required. This is from, I think, a study from
I think that's 21.
Yeah, from the Critical Raw Materials Act or something, where some information. So when you look at that, you see that we'll need really a lot of mines in the next few years. They must be started, but then we come to a major point, and maybe you can give us a little bit insight how Norway looks on this case. Regulation and permitting. I know this from a lot of things. In the 90s, for example, when I was working in the bank, it was always clear 3-4 years you're looking for a project, 3-4 years you're looking for permitting and financing, and 2 years later after you start the production. So you have a process of 8 to 10 years or 6 to 10 years where you go from finding something to production. Now we know that a lot of permitting starting 15 years ago, and they're still in process of permitting. How the things are looking here in Norway? Is this a straightforward process? You know exactly timelines, how long this can take, that you can bring a project to a final stage?
Yeah, happy to try and give some color around that. So I guess for us, it feels quite straightforward. And I don't think it's dissimilar in terms of the permitting structure in different parts of Europe. There's essentially 3 levels of permitting required. So you start with your exploration licenses, which are fairly easy to get. It's a matter of applying, and a few days later you can have your exploration license. So then you're in that process of exploring. You find something and develop let's say an economic resource that can move into a pre-feasibility study. So this is the way I like to explain the permitting system. If you follow what you would normally have for a financial process of a pre-feasibility study and a definitive feasibility study or bankable, this is the way the permitting process works. So we start with exploration, and then as you have enough information to move to that pre-feasibility, that's when you start your application for your extraction license. And then by the time you're at your ESIA, definitive feasibility study, that's when you apply for your mining or operating license. So it is fairly straightforward in terms of its those 3 levels. And I would say that myself and our COO, Mona Skunka, she has brought the first new mine in Norway into operation in the last 40 years. So she spent quite a long time with Nordic mining, and in between the two of us, we're very familiar with the regulatory system here. It's not a big country. It's fairly easy to connect with the regulators. So yeah, we don't see it as a difficult issue. And I think the dirty secret here is it isn't that hard. You just need to do things in parallel rather than sequentially. So as I said, as we prepare our pre-feasibility study, we can actually start preparing our permitting processes as well, undertaking our ESIA in parallel, so that it all comes together. So we believe, there's about a 6-year time frame between, let's say, where we are now and being able to get into production. So it doesn't need to be a 15-year process. Mm-hmm. But I think that's also a uniqueness about Kuniko and the management team that we have. We have the relevant experience for the country we're operating in, and it's not quite a common level of knowledge in terms of Norwegian operations.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes is for me a special the resistance what we get from the green parties. On one hand, they say, okay, we need zero emission. On the other way, they say, yeah, but we need no mines. And this is a conflict of interest. It cannot work together. So you need materials that you can establish a zero emission industry. So and sometimes I think the green parties don't really understand how this works. But I have no clue how Norway works, and I have also no clue about the project where they are located. So maybe when you are in an area where nobody lives, it's easier than in you be in an area where a lot of population is. So this brings me to a point. What is the most advanced project in your portfolio, and which commodity you look like in this case?
Yeah, so all our projects are focused on battery minerals, so copper, nickel, cobalt, lithium. Our flagship project is the Ringerike project, which is in southern Norway. So it's essentially a direct line, 40 kilometers from the capital of Oslo. So it's very well located. It takes about 90 minutes to drive directly from the international airport or via the capital of Oslo. You're about 1 hour from a deep sea port called Drammen. You're probably 3 hours by road to the Morrow gigafactory in Kristiansand, and you've also got the Glencore nickel processing facilities in southern Norway as well. So extremely well located. And the beauty about Norway, yes, it is easier to build things in sparsely populated areas. So while our project is so close to the capital, it's sufficiently rural that there's not a great deal of populations. There's small communities and townships around, but what you're looking at, the areas we have is essentially tree farming. So it's not a virgin forest. It's quite well utilized land for those purposes, which is essentially resource in itself in terms of trees. So yeah, we're quite blessed in terms of where that project is located. So it's a nickel, copper, cobalt project, predominantly nickel at our. So it's a large area, 405 square kilometers. We have a resource that we came out with in April this year for 23 million tonnes at around about a 0.31 nickel equivalent. So that's combining your nickel, your copper and your cobalt elements into a single sort of equivalent figure. We're about 3 weeks away from putting out an update to that mineral resource on one of the areas on this large license called Italian. So we should see an increase in the size of that resource that we've been able to achieve through some drilling this year, as well as studying the historic drill core that is available. So this is a well-explored area from I guess the 80s and 90s. We have access to all that historical drill core, and we've been able to leverage it. What we realized is, the previous explorer that was there was focusing only on high grade. And there is a good amount of high grade there. In our 23 million tonnes, around about 4.6 million tonnes is averaging at about 0.64% nickel equivalent. So there's a high grade zone there. But what we realised is there's mineralisation throughout the area. So it's disseminated, which means, you know, it's just not as dense. And there's a lot of it. So that's why we've been able to go from a smallish resource of high grade to a larger, modest grade resource, of which, you know, 17 million tonnes sits within 250 metres of surface. So if you can imagine mining that, you've got a sweet high grade lens, but you're able to leverage the mineralisation throughout the area and draw down through an open pit operation, which is obviously cost effective. So Italian is quite exciting in itself, but the area is large. There's at least 7 other mineral intrusions on this license area. So it's 20 kilometres of mineralised trend there. So that's where we've spent the summer actually doing some further work. That's unexplored ground. So we can get into that a bit further later. But yes, Ringerike is quite exciting, very well located, and we see as a potential hub for delivering these battery metals into Europe.
When I get right, when I look at the map of in your presentation, there was an old historical mine next to them. Do you know which grade they work?
Gosh, they produced about 200,000 tonnes, I think, 200 to 400, if my memory serves. And I think we were up around the 0.8% nickel thereabouts. And, you know, what we like about this Italian resource is very linear in terms of if you pick up a bucket and it's going to have the same proportions of nickel, copper and cobalt. So around about 55% nickel, 40% copper and 5% cobalt. And it's very consistent.
Okay. So you say there's a lot of other areas, targets in this project where you're looking for. Do you working on this active, or you think more you prepare this project and take this or advance this project, or is this vice versa that you are always looking on step outs or on other interested target on this area?
I'll explain it from my financial point of view, being a finance guy. So Italian's a great start. I think there's enough there that we can potentially, you know, build a case economically with, you know, further drilling and building up that mineral resource to establish, you know, a mine that's bankable. I think what we've seen, particularly through the summer, as we've looked at these other areas, there's, you know, we're getting high grades, in fact, even higher copper grades than the nickel at least 2 of these other areas. So there's a regional potential here. And if your audience has heard of Voisey's Bay, that's in Canada, that's a very similar system. So, you know, it's essentially chambers, if you like, of mineralization that have been, you know, formed as magma has, you know, moved through these pipes. So you've got pipes and chambers of mineralization. It's almost identical in terms of the way this looks at Ringerike as it does to Voisey's Bay. And Voisey's Bay is, you know, one of the world's largest nickel, copper, cobalt plays. So we have utilized an expert in this type of mineralization to assist us in understanding, you know, where to look next. So if you think a regional play, maybe your average mine life is 20 years, something like that. What we're seeing here is there's an opportunity for long-term production of these minerals and metals, which allows us to actually start thinking more about downstream opportunities, which is like what they call a hydrometallurgical process, which enables you essentially to produce battery chemicals at the mine site. And this is what Stellantis want. This is what we need to be thinking. The old way of thinking is we dig it up, produce a concentrate, we'd have to move it to Finland for some refining, bring it back to Norway for some smelting, ship it off to somewhere in Europe. So it's very complicated, high carbon footprint. What you can do here is produce a new industry focused on exactly what we need in Europe, and that's the materials for energy. So specifically, battery chemicals for EVs.
Okay. There is also a slide on page 16 where you talk a little bit about this alternative production scenarios. But this means also from the company, your focus is more on this project and not on the other project. You have a lot of other projects too. So, or you're looking, or you have exploration work also on the other projects.
No, we do continue to progress exploration on the other projects. So specifically, we've got projects in central Norway around the Trøndelag region for copper zinc. It's a prolific area. It's probably where most exploration companies operating in Norway, that's where their focus is. There's historical tier 1 mines there for copper. If you're going to find an abundance of copper minerals, it will be in this area. So we've had 3 projects there in that central Norway area, basically following a trend to what was one of these large historical mines, which was around about 19 million tonnes of production. So our project's licenses follow that trend, and we've had some good success over the summer. We've picked up high-grade samples. You're talking, 5% copper, 10% zinc, very sweet material. And then I think what we get really excited about is there's we discovered a new, what they call a hydrothermal system, which I'm not a geologist, but it's a very good indicator for copper mineralization. And that's 1.5 kilometers, averaging 3% copper. And if you look at on our recent figures, if you look at the map, you'll see the geophysics shows a U shape. So we know there's 1.5 kilometers, but this thing appears to continue, perhaps double. We need to follow up. So that copper project is super exciting, and with high confidence drill ready targets. So we're keen to progress that one. But we need to be prudent in the allocation of capital. So you've got competing projects. So I think we're quite fortunate to have a couple of very good projects in the stable.
Okay, but it's a good point what you say, also allocation of capital. So what are the plans for the next 12 years, or how to really think how it can be advanced to maybe a mine operation?
Yeah, so what we've provided in our public materials, we talk about Ringerike, we focus on that. We have the offtake with Stellantis for the nickel and cobalt sulfate products that they would have to come from this project. So they have 35% offtake at the moment. So it's a very clear path. We've got a resource. We can drill that out to increase the size and the confidence of the resource, which essentially takes you into that pre-feasibility stage, which you would then follow up with a definitive feasibility study, while going back to what I mentioned, running in parallel your permitting processes. So there's an opportunity here to get Ringerike into production, say 2030, 2031, but it's all subject to funding or capital, which is difficult to get in the current market. but Stellantis are behind us. They are still keen for the product, and we have a close contact with them. So yeah, we're pursuing opportunities that will enable us to move that project forward and, as much as possible, maintain that 2030 target timeline. So that's the focus. If, subject to capital, you go drill these other high confidence targets that we've recognised to the north of the Italian site, while also drilling out Italian to move that towards that PFS level. I think near term, there's some very low cost opportunity on the copper projects in Trondelag, with some geophysics work to identify further targets on that trend that I spoke of. But yeah, then it's to drilling, so test drilling of those. So that's really what the short term looks like. But the longer term plan for bringing Ringarika into production is very clear.
Anthony, thank you. I think it was really a great first introduction to your company. Good luck with all the work, and hopefully then that's mean also that next year when you start maybe a pre-feasibility study, that you start also the permitting process to going forward. So
Correct.
yeah, it's interesting to see how these things in Europe working. Norway is not part of the EU. That helps maybe a little bit from the regulation side. And you have not two regulations, you have only one regulation. So, so we must see the positive things too. Ja, thank you for the first introduction. Ja, das war eigentlich eine spannende Sache. Ich komme gleich zum extrem Positiven. Das hat mich verwundert, das habe ich so vorher eigentlich gar nicht gesehen. Das war die Aktienstruktur, 86 Millionen Aktien draußen, das ist wirklich extrem wenig. Stellantis Nummer 1 Investor mit über 19%, dann Vulcan Energy, die auch in Deutschland aktiv sind, haben 15%, von dem sind sie auch ein Spin-out, muss man sagen. Das heißt, die zwei kontrollieren 35% und dann die Top 20 Shareholder noch Stellantis und Vulcan halten Nummer 20-25%, das heißt, da haben wir 60% der Aktien. Sie haben noch genug Cash, dass sie weiter die Projekte vorwärts bringen. Sie sind in Norwegen, haben schon gesagt, sie haben ein Projekt. Ertelin, das ist, haben sie Mineralressourcen drauf. Sie konzentrieren sich eigentlich auf Batteriemetalle und ja, Permitting haben wir vorher geredet, schau, das ist immer ein Thema. Das ist schwierig, vor allem wenn man sich manche Gesetzgebungskeiten anschaut, dann dauert der Prozess teilweise für 15 Jahre oder länger. Jetzt haben wir das Thema hier, dass Sie sagen, das geht relativ straightforward. Du hast eine Explorationslizenz, dann hast du dann, sobald du in Pre-Feasibility gehst, startest du mit dem Genehmigungsprozess, dann kriegst du eine Extraktionslizenz und mit normalerweise 2030, 2031, wenn die Finanzierung dementsprechend in place ist, hast du deine Mine in Operation. Das klingt gut. Kann ich mir auch vorstellen, es ist nur 40 Kilometer von Oslo entfernt, das ist eigentlich auch sensationell. Ja, muss man mal schauen, was da an Ergebnissen rauskommt. Die Gehalte finde ich an sich ein bisschen niedrig, nur 31% an Nickel-Äquivalent. Aber sie haben hochgradige Erze drinnen, die hochgradige geht nur 64. Es gibt eine Mine, die hat irgendwo, die sitzt daneben, die hat früher so 0,8 abgebaut. Und sie haben diese High-Grade-Ore-Shoes drinnen, die eben sehr hochgradig sind, wo dann dementsprechend auch die Ökonomie nach oben geht. Wir brauchen die Metalle, das sieht man auch sehr gut an dieser Grafik, die rausgekommen ist, auch von der EU, wie viel der Verbrauch sich steigern soll und wie viele Minen das wir dazu brauchen. Und mit dem aufkommenden Trade War, den man auch mit den neuen Regierungen rund um die Welt sehen wird, ist es wichtig zu wissen, woher produzieren wir dieses Material. Und da ist Norwegen natürlich Nummer 1 Platz, brauchen wir überhaupt nicht reden. Ja, was gibt es sonst noch? Eigentlich nicht wirklich, was ich da, doch, das da. Dieses Projekt, wo er sagt, 1,5 Kilometer, ich nehme mal an, das wird hier in diesem Bereich sein, weil er sagt, das ist ja so eine Biegung drinnen. Dieser Trend, da haben sie 1,5 Kilometer, wo sie auch hochgradiges Kupfer eben gefunden haben mit teilweise 3%. Das wäre schon ein Wahnsinn. Da ist auch eine alte historische Mine dort, wo konzentriert sich eigentlich Bergbau in Norwegen. Sehr spannend. Also wenn das stimmt, dann könnte das eine ganz interessante Thematik sein. Und da haben sie halt im Sommer sehr gute Teile gesehen. Das werden sich auch früher oder später irgendwann einmal bohren. Aber der Fokus liegt natürlich bei einem Projekt, wo sie schon eine Ressource drauf haben, wo sie noch sehr viel Potenzial sehen, wo sie sehr viele Ziele haben, die sie eigentlich erst bearbeiten müssen. Aber es ist immer eine Frage des Geldes, das Kapital muss effizient eingesetzt werden und das traue ich ihnen auch zu. Ich meine, ich habe noch nie eine Company gesehen in Australien, die nur 6 oder 8 Millionen Aktien hat und schon 3 oder 4 Jahre am Markt ist. Das habe ich eigentlich noch nicht gesehen und auch so Aktionärstruktur sieht man selten. Also das ist extrem positiv. Ja, das war's von Kuniko. Heute ist der 20. November und ja, klasses Interview, war echt spannend und wie gesagt, so eine Struktur habe ich überhaupt noch nie gesehen bei einem, oder selten gesehen bei einem Explorationsunternehmen. So, das war's von Kuniko am 20. November. Tschüss und Baba. Pfiat euch. Anthony, thank you for your time. Was really a very interesting introduction to your company.
Thank you very much.